Republicans in North Carolina are trying to steal a Supreme Court seat. They've hit some roadblocks, but there's a clear path still for this seat to be stolen as Judge Jefferson Griffin challenges Justice Allison Riggs' very clear election victory last November. She won by 700 plus votes. Typical close Supreme Court election in North Carolina. Thrilled to be joined today to dig into this really, really challenging and important dynamic down in North Carolina as everybody, I think, sort of spins around trying to figure out what's going on at the national level. This election subversion attempt remains of critical importance. Billy Corriher is joining us today, the state courts manager from People's Parity Project. Thank you so much for joining us. Billy, what is the latest down in North Carolina? Our audience has heard from us before about what's going on down there. So maybe a quick overview and an update would be really helpful.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Alex. Well, what's going on is we've got this losing candidate, as you mentioned, Judge Jefferson Griffin, and he's basically trying to get the courts to throw out more than 60,000 votes and just declare him the winner. He is challenging these rules that were set up before the election. These are rules that were litigated by the Elections Board, state court, federal court, and everyone agreed before the election that this is what the rules were going to be. Jefferson Griffin lost under those rules. So now he's saying we need to go back and change the rules retroactively so that these 60,000 plus voters are not eligible to vote, and we should throw out their ballots. It's a real attack on our democracy, an attempt to undermine the election results and just steal an election, like you said. And right now the case is at the North Carolina Court of Appeals, where Republicans have a very, very large majority. And the court there is either going to be heard by a 3-judge panel or Justice Riggs, the incumbent candidate, has asked the entire Court of Appeals to rule on the case. And there's also a chance that the federal Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals could still intervene in the case. They have declined to intervene so far, but in North Carolina, we are hoping that they will realize that this is a real alarming attack on democracy that we have here, and we need federal courts to step in. So that's kind of where we're at now. We're just kind of waiting to see if hopefully the federal courts will step in and help us out here.
Lisa, I want to make sure we dig into all the dark money election denialism that you and your team at True North have really helped uncover behind this effort to steal the election. But before we turn to that, I was hoping we could just dig in a little bit more granularly in terms of some of this legal procedure, because I think this audience is here for that. At the state court level, correct me if I'm wrong, Billy, but Justice Riggs sought to have the North Carolina Supreme Court step in so that they could just decide this once and for all without the far right Court of Appeals getting involved. They declined to do that, which actually, as far as I understand it, sets them up to much more easily hand the election to Griffin if, in fact, the state Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals overturned the lower court's ruling for Riggs. All they would have to do is deadlock, and then that reversal would be affirmed. And then at the Fourth Circuit level, could you break down what's at issue there? They're trying to remove the case to federal court. Is that right?
Well, they've already tried, and the Fourth Circuit sort of shot them down, but they maintained jurisdiction over the case. So we're sort of waiting to see if they're going to jump back in. That's kind of where we're at right now. And if you look at the challenges in state court, Griffin is basically advancing a few different arguments for why these votes shouldn't count. The bulk of the challenges is about the registration forms that voters used when they signed up to vote. These forms at the time didn't include a social security number or driver's license number. He's claiming that means that they violate the law and that they should be thrown out. So that's the kind of like radical argument that he's putting forth in our state courts, where, there's a lot of like Republicans on our appellate courts that I think are probably going to be sympathetic with him because, our judges are elected in partisan elections and, a lot of them rule in very partisan ways. And so that's why I think folks are so worried about what's going to happen in the state courts.
Yeah, it really is extraordinary. I have to say, Billy, I deeply appreciate the work that you and so many other allies are doing in North Carolina to try to defend just the basic the basic fundamentals in our democracy, which is, when a person wins that election, they should take that office, and there shouldn't be some sort of do-over on a partisan basis. Doesn't matter which party it is. Although obviously this is a situation where the Republican Party appointees are being asked to do the bidding of a political party through the judicial function. And so, we've seen a lot of dark money coming in North Carolina over many years, as have you. We've talked about this in different settings, but, they just pop up with just one more random name group after another, money coming in through RSLC, the Republican State Leadership Committee, money coming in from billionaire Charles Koch. Obviously, a lot of these groups are tied to another multi-millionaire named Art Pope. And so, we can name the bad guys, but the real sort of evil of this is this idea that they can just violate the rights of voters, of American citizens in North Carolina, and come in and just disregard not one vote or 3 votes or 10 votes, but 60,000 votes. I think that's unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen in any state these sort of machinations. I wonder if you could talk to or speak to this issue of, who are some of the voters who are being affected? Who are some of the fellow Americans who are affected by this effort to cancel their, basically sacred right to vote in our elections?
Yeah. You're right, Lisa. I mean, we've heard a lot of these voters are speaking out and trying to defend their vote and make sure that it is counted. A lot of these folks are overseas voters. So they're military folks, or they're the families of military folks. They're like children of folks that are in the military and stationed overseas. He wants to throw out their votes. And the crazy part about all of this, and you were kind of getting at this, Lisa, is he's not alleging that any of these voters broke the rules. There's not an allegation that a single voter broke the rules. We've had close elections in North Carolina in the past. In 2016, our election for governor was pretty close. And there were all these allegations that this voter did something wrong, this voter did something wrong, and they challenged the ballots that way. But that's not what Jefferson Griffin is doing. He is just saying this big bucket of votes is, ineligible to vote, and we should throw them out. And he's only looking at these Democratic-leaning counties. So all the folks that voted for him, he doesn't want to throw out their votes.
Yeah, it really is extraordinary. When you think about Bush v. Gore back in 2000, where the U.S. Supreme Court, on a partisan basis, a strictly partisan basis, with Republicans voting to stop the recount in Florida, they stopped it in part on the claim that you couldn't have a partial recount in the state, that they couldn't just recount, the southern counties, which were being challenged in part because of some of the way the ballots were drafted there. And here we are, 2 decades or more later, and we have a Republican judge who identifies basically as a Republican judge, who is part of this group of Republican judges that the right-wing legislature, which has captured the state, despite the number of Democrats in the state, this gerrymandering, this real effort to redraw the maps in a way to give basically minority rule. And you have now a person who's seeking the highest judicial office in the state of North Carolina, willing to try to use his power and really the power of his fellow Republican appointees to disregard the votes of American citizens, including American citizens who are serving our nation abroad in defense of our democracy. It is truly astonishing. I wonder if there are specific things you could share that you think people can do to help.
Well, I think the biggest thing right now is just drawing attention to this problem. I think, if they're going to get away with this, they're going to get away with this because people aren't paying enough attention to it. And one thing that you mentioned earlier, Alex, is that the North Carolina Court of Appeals could have the final say in this case, because right now the state Supreme Court has washed their hands of this case and sent it back to the lower courts. And I want people in North Carolina to turn out to the Court of Appeals whenever they have their argument and let them know that they're watching, they're paying attention, and they're not going to let them get away with this.
Amazing. Billy, thank you so much for what you're doing. Maybe just as a parting question, you could tell us a little bit more about your work on state courts, not just in North Carolina, but across the country. Why are state courts so important? I mean, obviously they're important if folks are willing to invest this much money into trying to steal state Supreme Court elections. And we're seeing this not just in North Carolina, but a huge money dump right now underway in Wisconsin, where they're going to the polls for an important state Supreme Court election. Tell us about what you're doing at People's Parity Project to fortify our state courts, to protect them against these assaults, and to grow a pipeline of strong leaders to fill these state courts and preserve our democracy.
Yes, thanks, Alex. I mean, at PPP, we are working with law students around the country. We're working with other national groups to try and create a pipeline to these courts to get some good judges. We really want judges on the bench who have experience representing people, not representing corporations or representing the state. Those are the kind of judges that we usually see, right? Prosecutors or corporate lawyers. We want to see folks who worked at legal aid, former public defenders, and folks like that on the bench. And so that's kind of the work that we do around the country. And in North Carolina, that includes supporting folks like Justice Allison Riggs, who is a former civil rights lawyer. She's done a lot of litigation in North Carolina in both federal and state court. But we've seen in North Carolina the ways that state courts are so important, whether it comes to gerrymandering and voting rights, issues like that, criminal justice, all that stuff happens in the states. And these courts are absolutely crucial to protecting our individual rights, especially given what's happening at the federal level. I think the right and these corporate interests really understand that, and that's why they're fighting so hard to keep control of these courts. But ultimately, at the state level in most places, the voters have the ultimate say. So it's really up to us. We have the power.
Absolutely. Billy, thank you so much for joining us, for everything you're doing. Until next time, please don't forget to hit that free subscribe button. Check out our work at Court Accountability, Court Accountability Action. We're at courtaccountability.org and on Substack at Tilted Scales. Check out PPP. You heard recently from Molly Coleman, PPP's executive director. You guys are doing awesome stuff. So great to work with you at the national level, at the state level. Always great to see you. And thanks so much. See you next time.
Thanks, Alex.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.